In March 2012, the lifeless body of 29-year-old Jessica Monroe was discovered in her honeymoon suite at the Paradise Bay Resort in Maui, Hawaii. Just weeks earlier, in February 2012, Jessica had married Eric Monroe in a picturesque ceremony in San Diego, California. What was meant to be the start of a beautiful future took a dark turn as secrets, lies, and a tangled web of infidelity emerged, culminating in a brutal murder that would leave a lasting scar on all who knew her. At 6 a.m. on March 7, 2012, the peaceful morning at the Paradise Bay Resort in Maui was shattered when a noise complaint led staff to the third floor of the luxury hotel. The resort, nestled among palm trees and golden beaches, was known for its tranquility. It was the kind of place where honeymooners came to bask in love and serenity. But what staff found in room 304 that morning would haunt them forever. The complaint had come from a guest staying in the adjacent suite, who reported hearing loud bangs and crashing sounds during the night. Initially dismissing it as a couple's heated argument or a drunken mishap, the front desk sent a housekeeping supervisor to investigate. As she approached the door of room 304, the silence was eerie. She knocked twice, her heart racing as there was no response. Using her master key, she opened the door and froze. The suite, once pristine and filled with the joy of newlywed celebrations, was now unrecognizable. The living area was in disarray, with overturned furniture and a shattered glass vase on the floor. But it was the bedroom that bore the brunt of the horror. Jessica Monroe's lifeless body lay on the plush carpet near the foot of the bed. Blood pooled beneath her, staining the once bright fabric of her white honeymoon robe. The air was thick with the metallic smell of blood, mingling with the faint scent of tropical flowers from the resort's signature toiletries. Jessica's face told a story of unimaginable suffering. Deep lacerations cut across her forehead and cheek, and one of her eyes was swollen shut, darkened by bruises. Her hands, bloodied and scratched, suggested she had fought back with everything she had. Around her neck were faint but visible marks, as though someone had tried to choke her before delivering the final, brutal blows. Shards of broken glass surrounded her, glinting under the morning light filtering through the open balcony doors. The supervisor stumbled back in shock, her trembling hands fumbling for the hotel phone to call 911. Her voice broke as she described the scene to the operator, struggling to comprehend what she had just witnessed. Within minutes, local police arrived, sirens cutting through the serene Maui morning. Officers moved swiftly, securing the area and escorting shaken hotel staff and curious guests away from the third floor. Detectives from the Maui Police Department arrived shortly after, led by seasoned investigator Detective Alan Reyes. Reyes, known for his methodical approach, surveyed the scene with grim determination. He had seen violence before, but the brutality of this crime unsettled even him. Jessica Monroe, 29 years old, lay in what should have been a sanctuary of love and joy. Instead, it was now a crime scene soaked in pain and unanswered questions. Forensic experts began their meticulous work, documenting every detail of the room. Blood spatter patterns on the walls and ceiling suggested a prolonged struggle. The bedside lamp, found shattered near Jessica's body, appeared to have been used as a weapon. Tiny pieces of glass embedded in her hands indicated she had tried to shield herself during the attack. The experts collected fingerprints from the lamp, the balcony railing, and various other surfaces, hoping they would lead to the perpetrator. Jessica's husband, Eric Monroe, was notably absent. His belongings, including his wallet and suitcase, were missing, leaving behind only scattered personal items like a single dress shirt hanging in the closet and a pair of shoes near the door. Interviews with hotel staff revealed that Eric had been seen the previous evening at the resort's beachfront bar. Witnesses reported a heated argument between the couple, their voices rising above the cheerful chatter of other guests. Jessica had appeared distraught, her face pale, her movements tense, while Eric was described as visibly agitated, his tone sharp and biting. The timeline of events leading to the discovery began to take shape. Security footage confirmed that Eric and Jessica had returned to their suite around 10:45 p.m. the night before. In the footage, Jessica walked several steps ahead of Eric, her posture stiff, her arms crossed. Eric followed closely, glancing over his shoulder, as if aware of being watched. This was the last time anyone saw Jessica alive. The resort's guests, now aware of the unfolding tragedy, whispered among themselves in hushed tones. Some recalled fleeting interactions with the couple during their stay. Jessica, with her warm smile and gentle demeanor, had struck other honeymooners as a kind soul. She had been seen lounging by the pool, with a book in hand, or sharing laughter over candlelit dinners with Eric. But those who observed them closely also noted moments of tension, quick glances exchanged during meals, muted disagreements behind closed doors. It was as if beneath the surface of their newlywed bliss lay an undercurrent of something darker. As the investigation continued, Detective Reyes turned his attention to the suite's balcony, which overlooked the sparkling Pacific Ocean. The door had been left slightly ajar, and sandy footprints suggested someone had walked barefoot from the bedroom to the balcony and back again. It was unclear whether these prints belonged to Jessica, Eric, or someone else entirely. The gentle breeze from the ocean now felt like a cruel contrast to the horrors inside. By mid-morning, Jessica's body was removed from the scene, her delicate frame carefully covered and carried out under the watchful eyes of investigators. The resort staff, many of whom had interacted with the couple just days before, stood silently as the stretcher passed. Some wept quietly, unable to reconcile the lively woman they had served tropical drinks to with the lifeless figure being wheeled away. The Maui Police Department issued a statement to the media that afternoon, confirming the death of Jessica Monroe and announcing the launch of a homicide investigation. While they declined to name suspects, the absence of Eric Monroe raised immediate suspicions. Was he on the run, or was he another victim of this heinous crime? The island, a paradise for so many, was now gripped by fear and speculation. The first few hours of the investigation set the tone for what would become one of Maui's most chilling murder cases. In the days to come, the tangled threads of love, betrayal, and violence would begin to unravel. But for now, the focus remained on the unanswered question that hung heavy in the air. What really happened in room 304? Rebecca Mathis was not just a woman, she was a force. At 32, she carried the weight of experiences that most people couldn't imagine. Her time as a combat medic in Iraq had forged her into someone unshakable, someone precise, In the chaos of war, she had been the calm voice guiding soldiers to safety, the steady hands patching up wounds as bullets flew around her. Her colleagues spoke of her bravery in hushed tones, calling her a hero. Yet, like so many heroes, she bore scars invisible to the world. Those scars came from more than just her 2 deployments. They went back to her childhood, to the years spent under the roof of an abusive father, who ruled the house with fists and rage. Rebecca had learned early to mask her emotions, to stand tall no matter how much it hurt inside. That steely exterior served her well in the military, where she quickly climbed the ranks, earning the respect of her peers and superiors alike. But it also isolated her. Few could see the cracks forming beneath the surface. In 2004, fresh from her first tour, Rebecca met Eric Mathis. He was everything she thought she needed: charismatic, ambitious, and with just enough edge to match her own resilience. Eric, a fellow Marine, had left active duty and begun working as a defense contractor. To the outside world, they seemed like the perfect couple: strong, capable, and deeply in love. Together, they navigated the challenges of military life, moving from base to base, supporting each other through deployments and long nights apart. But those who knew them closely could sense something off. While Rebecca approached life with discipline and order, Eric had a way of cutting corners and bending rules to his advantage. As the years went on, Rebecca's battle with PTSD grew harder to ignore. The nightmares were relentless, dragging her back to the horrors of the battlefield. She hid it well, at least she thought she did. But Eric began to distance himself. Instead of being her partner, he became a stranger in their shared home. And then there was the affair. Eric's charm was undeniable, but it often strayed into dangerous territory. At his new job, he met Heather Crowley, a co-worker whose youth and energy captivated him. Heather was the kind of woman who lived unapologetically, someone who demanded attention without trying. Their affair began innocently enough: late-night conversations over work projects, shared drinks after office hours. But it quickly deepened, becoming a consuming passion that Eric struggled to hide. Rebecca first noticed the changes in Eric's behavior in early 2012. He began coming home late, his explanations vague, and his phone always turned face down. He spent money more freely, indulging in purchases that seemed out of character for someone as financially cautious as he once had been. Still, Rebecca didn't want to believe what her instincts were telling her. She clung to the hope that their marriage could be salvaged, that the man she had once loved was still there somewhere. That hope was shattered in March 2012 when Rebecca discovered the email. She had been using their shared laptop to file paperwork when an alert popped up, a new message in Eric's inbox. She clicked it without thinking, and what she found froze her. The exchange between Eric and Heather was filled with intimate details of their relationship, from secret weekends together to plans for a future that didn't include Rebecca. But Rebecca didn't confront Eric immediately. Instead, she sat with the knowledge, letting it fester and grow. The betrayal cut deeply, not just because of the affair, but because of what it represented: a complete disregard for the sacrifices she had made. While she had been fighting battles overseas and at home, Eric had been siphoning money from their joint account to fund Heather's lavish lifestyle. He had bought her expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and paid for extravagant getaways, all while Rebecca worked overtime shifts and battled her demons alone. Rebecca's response was not impulsive. Her military training had taught her the value of planning and precision. She began observing Eric more closely, taking note of his routines, his lies, and the way he seemed almost proud of his deception. It was as though he believed he was untouchable, that Rebecca would never have the strength to challenge him. But he underestimated her. On April 1, 2012, Eric came home late again. Rebecca could smell the faint trace of perfume on his clothes, a scent that wasn't hers. He didn't bother to offer an excuse, instead brushing past her and heading straight for the shower. That night, Rebecca didn't sleep. She lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and loss. The man she had married, the man she had built her life around, had destroyed her trust and humiliated her. By morning, her resolve was set. At 7:15 a.m. on April 2, 2012, Rebecca finally confronted Eric. In the kitchen, the morning sunlight streaming through the windows did little to soften the tension in the air. She accused him outright, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. Eric's response was cold and dismissive at first, but as Rebecca pressed him, he admitted to the affair. His words were cruel, laced with mockery, as he blamed her for his infidelity, pointing to her struggles with PTSD and accusing her of failing to meet his needs. What happened next was a moment of blinding rage. Rebecca saw the Glock sitting on the counter, a weapon they had both trained with countless times. In an instant, years of pain, betrayal, and suppressed anger boiled over. She grabbed the gun and fired. The first shot missed, but the next 5 didn't. Each one hit its mark, each one fueled by the weight of everything she had endured. As Eric collapsed to the floor, Rebecca stood frozen, the gun still in her hand. His last words, a cruel whisper, hung in the air like a curse. For a moment, the house was silent, save for Rebecca's own shallow breaths. Then, the reality of what she had done began to sink in. The man who had betrayed her lay lifeless before her, and there was no turning back. In the hours that followed, Rebecca would sit quietly, waiting for the authorities. Her calmness unnerved even the seasoned officers who arrived at the scene. She confessed immediately, her voice steady, as though she had rehearsed the moment in her mind 1,000 times. But beneath that calm exterior lay a woman broken by the weight of a life filled with duty, sacrifice, and betrayal. The investigation that followed would reveal the layers of secrets and lies that had led to that tragic morning. The evening of March 6, 2012, began as a celebration of Hawaiian culture at the Paradise Bay Resort's vibrant luau. Tiki torches lined the sandy pathway, illuminating a scene of lively music, graceful hula dancers, and guests seated at long communal tables, enjoying the island's finest cuisine. For the resort's honeymooners, it was an event designed to create cherished memories. But for Jessica and Eric Monroe, it would mark the final unraveling of a marriage already hanging by a thread. Jessica and Eric arrived late, their strained expressions setting them apart from the cheerful couples around them. While the other guests sipped Mai Tais and clapped along to the rhythmic beats of the drums, Jessica seemed distracted. Her eyes frequently darted toward Eric, who was sitting stiffly at her side. Despite the festive surroundings, an unspoken tension lingered between them, a tension that hadn't gone unnoticed by resort staff over the past few days. As the evening wore on, Jessica's unease grew. Witnesses later recalled her demeanor shifting from reserved to visibly upset. Her eyes followed Eric's every movement, particularly when he excused himself to fetch another drink. A few minutes later, she saw him standing near the bar, leaning in close to a young, attractive female guest. Their interaction was subtle, yet undeniably intimate. Eric's posture relaxed, the woman laughing softly as he gestured toward her. The sight seemed to strike a nerve in Jessica. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor, drawing glances from nearby tables. What happened next would be remembered by several witnesses. Jessica approached Eric and the woman, her body tense, her voice sharp enough to cut through the celebratory atmosphere. Those who saw the confrontation described Jessica's face as flushed with anger and betrayal, while Eric's demeanor shifted from smug confidence to visible irritation. The female guest quickly slipped away, leaving the couple locked in a heated exchange that grew louder with each passing moment. Eric's body language turned defensive, his arms crossed as he leaned in toward Jessica. She, in turn, gestured emphatically, her movements growing more frantic. By now, nearby guests had turned their attention from the performers to the brewing argument, their curiosity piqued by the public unraveling of the newlyweds. Eventually, Eric stormed off, leaving Jessica standing alone in the dim glow of the tiki torches. A few moments later she followed him, her strides purposeful and determined. The resort's security cameras captured the couple's return to their suite later that night. At 10:45 p.m., Jessica entered first, her pace brisk, her posture stiff. Eric trailed behind her approximately 15 minutes later, his hands shoved into his pockets, his expression unreadable. These would be the last known images of Jessica alive. What happened inside room 304 between 11 p.m. and midnight remained a mystery, but the details that emerged from witness reports painted a grim picture. Guests in neighboring rooms reported hearing loud crashes and muffled shouting, followed by a piercing scream that seemed to shake the walls. Some claimed the sounds continued for several minutes, growing more violent before abruptly falling silent. One guest, staying just 2 doors down, later described the chilling stillness that followed the chaos. It was like the room itself was holding its breath, she recalled. No one knocked on the door or called for help that night, dismissing the noises as a drunken quarrel, a decision that would haunt many of them when they learned what had happened. In the quiet that followed, the tropical breeze carried the faint sound of waves crashing against the shore, masking the horrific reality unfolding inside room 304. Forensic evidence would later reveal that a struggle had taken place throughout the suite. Blood spatter patterns suggested a violent confrontation, with Jessica fighting desperately to defend herself. Shards of glass from the shattered bedside lamp were scattered across the floor, mingled with droplets of blood that formed a trail, leading to where Jessica's body was eventually found. The scene inside the room was one of unimaginable violence. The once pristine honeymoon suite, decorated with fresh lace and soft linens, now bore the marks of a deadly struggle. Overturned furniture and torn bedding hinted at the intensity of the fight, while the bloodstains on the walls told a story of rage and desperation. At midnight, the commotion ceased entirely, leaving behind an eerie stillness that would only be broken the following morning when hotel staff entered the room. The security footage revealed no further movement from the suite until the horrifying discovery at 6 a.m. Eric's behavior in the hours following Jessica's death raised immediate suspicions. He did not call for help, nor did he report the incident to hotel staff. Instead, he vanished. Security footage showed him leaving the suite shortly after midnight, dressed in casual clothes, carrying a small duffel bag. The cameras caught him exiting the resort through a side entrance and disappearing into the night. His departure was deliberate, his movements calculated, leaving behind a trail of questions and a scene of devastation. For the guests and staff at the Paradise Bay Resort, the events of March 6, 2012, turned an evening of joy into a haunting memory. The once lively luau was now remembered not for its music or food, but for the tragedy that unfolded in its wake. As the investigation began, the focus turned to Eric Monroe, the man who had walked away from a scene of unimaginable horror, leaving the world to wonder what truly happened in those final, fateful hours. Jessica Monroe's death sent ripples far beyond the walls of room 304 at the Paradise Bay Resort. Her family, devastated by the loss, struggled to make sense of the tragedy. Jessica's mother, Carolyn, who had been her biggest supporter, found solace in action. In early 2013, she launched the Jessica Monroe Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting victims of domestic abuse. Through her grief, Carolyn turned her daughter's memory into a beacon of hope for others, channeling her pain into a mission to save lives. The foundation grew quickly, thanks to the widespread media coverage of Jessica's case. Donations poured in from people across the country, moved by the story of a woman whose life was taken far too soon. The foundation provided shelter, counseling, and legal aid to survivors of abusive relationships, often citing Jessica's story as a reminder of how quickly love could turn dangerous. Carolyn often spoke at fundraisers, her voice steady, despite the sadness that lingered in her eyes. She described her daughter as a kind, selfless woman who had dreamed of helping others, and through the foundation, that dream lived on. Meanwhile, Laura Peterson, Jessica's former best friend, faced a very different kind of fallout. Her involvement in the affair with Eric Monroe became public knowledge during his trial, painting her as a key figure in the web of betrayal that preceded Jessica's death. Once admired for her vibrant personality and close bond with Jessica, Laura became a pariah. In her small California town, whispers followed her everywhere she went. Friends and neighbors, disgusted by her betrayal, distanced themselves. The backlash was swift and unforgiving. Laura's career as a freelance designer suffered, with clients pulling out of contracts after her name appeared in headlines. In 2014, she relocated to another state, hoping to escape the shadow of the scandal. But even in her new town, the weight of her actions followed her. The affair had left her reputation in ruins, and while she tried to rebuild her life, the guilt she carried made it impossible to move forward fully. Eric Monroe, sentenced to 25 years to life in July 2014, continued to proclaim his innocence from prison. In interviews conducted with reporters and in letters to friends, Eric painted himself as a victim of circumstance. He claimed that his emotions had been manipulated and that the events of that night were not as they seemed. He alleged that Jessica's anger over the affair had escalated the situation, though these claims were dismissed by the jury during his trial. Eric's narrative left the public divided. Some saw him as a cold-blooded murderer, a man whose jealousy and guilt had driven him to take the life of his wife. Others wondered if there was more to the story, if the truth was tangled in a web of lies and hidden motives. The evidence against Eric had been damning, but his insistence on his innocence raised questions that would linger for years. For Jessica's family, however, the truth was clear. To them, Eric was a man who had stolen their daughter's future, a man who had destroyed their family with his lies and violence. They visited Jessica's grave often, leaving flowers and notes that spoke of their enduring love. Carolyn continued to fight for other victims of abuse, but the pain of losing Jessica never faded. Every success of the foundation was bittersweet, a reminder of what had been lost. The case became a haunting tale that the media revisited every few years. Documentaries, podcasts, and articles dissected every detail, feeding the public's fascination with the tragedy. But for those who lived it, the story was not just another headline. It was a wound that would never fully heal. Jessica's life, filled with kindness and hope, had been cut short, leaving behind a legacy of pain, love, and a fight for justice that would outlive the man who had taken it all away. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss our daily updates. For more jaw-dropping stories, check out the case of a wife with terminal cancer who took revenge on her husband for cheating with her mother. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.